Do you know how many servings of vegetables we should be aiming for daily? I won't make you wait for the answer. On average, Americans consume just over 1.5 servings of vegetables per day. That's less than a third of what most scientific studies tell us is optimal for reducing risks of health problems like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. Yes, ideally we should be aiming for about 5 servings of vegetables per day. But if 5 servings of vegetables feels overwhelming, I've got so much good news to share with you in this video. Stick with me to learn about all of the different health benefits we can get from eating more vegetables, where the data is mixed on how many to eat, how going from no veggies per day to any is even more beneficial than going from lots to even more, along with what counts as a vegetable and how big a serving even is. Hint, it's a lot smaller than you probably think. One of the most important hallmarks of a healthy diet is high fruit and vegetable consumption. In fact, a 2017 meta-analysis showed that consuming 800 grams of fruits and vegetables per day, equivalent to 1 3/4 pounds or 28 ounces, reduces risk of all-cause mortality by an incredible 31% compared to consuming 40 grams of fruits and vegetables per day or less. And the authors calculated that if all of us ate at least 800 grams of vegetables and fruit daily, that could prevent globally every single year 2.24 million deaths from cardiovascular disease, 660,000 deaths from cancer, and 7.8 million deaths from all causes. Those are some big numbers. In contrast, a 2019 analysis by the CDC revealed that only 10% of Americans eat the recommended amount of vegetables, and only 12.5% of Americans eat the recommended amount of fruit. So just upping our fruit and vegetable intake could have a profound impact on the landscape of public health. A huge 2019 review summarized a wealth of scientific evidence, showing that the more vegetables and fruits we consume, the lower our risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, chronic kidney disease, osteoporosis, and bone fragility fractures, cognitive impairment and dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, neurodegenerative diseases, allergies, asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, age-related macular degeneration, cataracts, glaucoma, depression, anxiety, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory polyarthritis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, acne, and seborrheic dermatitis. Wow! There's also emerging evidence for a role of vegetable and fruit intake in lowering markers of inflammation and reducing risk of infection, migraine headaches, diverticular disease, eczema, and more. Importantly, vegetables and fruit are independently beneficial, meaning we get the most benefits when we include both in our regular diets. I'll talk about fruit specifically in another video, so today let's zoom in on vegetables and answer the question, how much vegetables should we be eating to get all of these health benefits? We answer this question by looking at the relationship between all-cause mortality and different intake levels of vegetables, while accounting for other diet factors. All-cause mortality is a general indicator of health and longevity that's used in scientific studies to determine whether or not something is good or bad for us overall. And to figure out the optimum number of vegetable servings to eat per day, we're looking for an inflection point or plateau in the dose response. That number of daily vegetable servings where we get most or all of the health benefits. Now, all-cause mortality does not establish causation, but rather a statistical link. To establish causality, these data must necessarily be followed up by mechanistic studies like cell culture studies and rodent studies that look at causal biochemical pathways, and or intervention studies like clinical trials where you change something for one group of people and compare that against a control. Fortunately for us, we know exactly what nutrients are in vegetables that are responsible for these health benefits. Vegetables are rich sources of diverse fiber types, of many different types of phytonutrients, vitamin C, vitamin K, copper, and manganese. Many vegetables are also abundant in B vitamins, especially vitamins B1, B5, B6, folate, and biotin, as well as potassium and magnesium. That reminds me of a joke. Why should you never tell secrets in a garden? Because the corn have ears, the potatoes have eyes, and the beans talk. I hope that mom joke earned your subscribe. While the data is certainly mixed and you could make a case for aiming for 3 servings of vegetables per day, my take on this science is that the preponderance of evidence suggests optimal vegetable consumption is 5 servings per day. If that sounds like a lot, you are not alone. In the United States, the average vegetable consumption is a mere 1.64 cup equivalents, or just over 1.5 servings per day. But there's some really important insight to be gleaned by having a closer look at these scientific studies. So let's do that. A 2014 meta-analysis showed that for each serving of vegetables per day we add, risk of all-cause mortality goes down by 5%. But like other studies, this meta-analysis shows that that relationship is not linear. You get much more benefit going from 0 servings of vegetables per day to 1 than you get from going from 3 to 4. In fact, this study showed the maximum benefit from eating fruits and vegetables occurred at about 5 servings per day. Ideally 3 servings of vegetables and 2 servings of fruit, which reduced risk of all-cause mortality by 26%. Now, all of the other big studies do show that the benefits of eating vegetables don't level off, if they level off, until a higher number of servings than that. For example, this 2017 meta-analysis showed that consuming 600 grams of vegetables per day, that's like 6 servings, reduced risk of all-cause mortality by 25%, cardiovascular disease by 28%, and cancer by 12%. And they showed that there was no plateau of health benefits from increasing vegetable consumption. This study implies the more the merrier when it comes to vegetable consumption. But importantly, all of these studies show that there's no harm or loss of benefits from exceeding that number of servings. So if you love your veggies, you can eat as many of them as you want. This data comes from another 2017 meta-analysis, which showed that all-cause mortality decreased by up to 11%, with increasing intake of vegetables up to about 300 grams daily, 3-ish servings, and with no apparent benefit above that amount. And a 2022 meta-analysis showed that eating 4 or 5 servings of vegetables per day reduced risk of stroke, ischemic heart disease, and type 2 diabetes, all by 23% or more. Specifically, regularly eating 4 or 5 servings of vegetables per day reduces risk of ischemic stroke by 23.2%, ischemic heart disease by 22.9%, hemorrhagic stroke by 15.9%, esophageal cancer by 28.5%, and type 2 diabetes by 26.1%. Taking all of this science into account, we can say that a prudent goal is aiming for 5 or more servings of vegetables per day. But let's actually define how much a serving actually is. A serving is standardized by volumetric measurements. For most vegetables, a serving is 1 cup measured raw. It's 2 cups for leafy vegetables and 1/4 cup for those fatty fruit vegetables like avocados and olives. And it's not as much as you think. Volumetric measurements have helpful visual aspects to them, and we can approximate 1 cup to about the same volume as your fist. So if you're a person who can put your whole fist in your mouth, you could fit a whole serving of broccoli in there in one go too. And remember that most vegetables shrink by about half when cooked. So we approximate a serving as 1/2 cup or about half of a fist of cooked vegetables. That's not as intimidating, right? It's also worth noting that tomatoes, okra, cucumber, bell pepper, zucchini, winter squash, avocados, olives, they all count as vegetables. In nutritional sciences, we use the culinary definitions of what is a fruit versus a vegetable instead of the botanical ones. And that's because the culinary definitions better align with the nutrition content of these foods. For example, cucumber is much more similar nutritionally to celery than it is to a kiwi. And winter squash is much more similar nutritionally to a sweet potato than it is to an orange. So it makes much more sense to classify cucumbers and winter squash as vegetables. And you don't need to overthink it. If it's sweet and typically used in sweet applications, it's a fruit. And if it's not sweet and typically used in savory applications, it's a vegetable. If you're still feeling like that's too many vegetables, it's really important to know that every bit of progress counts. In fact, you get way more health bang for your vegetable eating buck going from eating no vegetables to 1 serving per day than you go from eating 4 to eating 5 servings per day. And it's totally okay to work up to that bigger serving goal over time. As I mentioned, the dose-response relationship between vegetable consumption and all of the health benefits that we can get from eating more vegetables is not linear. As we add more servings of vegetables to our daily diets, we get diminishing returns for each serving. That means you get way more health benefit going from eating no vegetables to any, compared to going from eating lots of vegetables to even more. In fact, going from 0 servings of vegetables to 1 delivers about the same magnitude of health benefit as going from 1 to 5. That's right, eating 5 servings of vegetables per day is only about twice as good as eating 1. This is particularly good news if you currently don't eat very many vegetables, because every bit of effort you put into upping your veggie intake will yield dividends in terms of your health. On the flip side, consuming more than 5 servings of vegetables per day, while still beneficial, there's diminishing returns. And if you're interested, I cover the importance of eating a variety of vegetables in even more depth in my new book, Nutrivore, including which types of vegetables have the biggest health impact. You can order my book from any online bookseller or your local independent bookstore.